And your comments are coming fast and furious. Samuel says, yes, they're not well regulated, but they save many people in need to access cash from cumbersome bank processes. Okay, I think that's a totally different subject, but thank you for your comment all the same. We have Jessica, who says, yes, social media is created to ensure that it looks one way, but the reality on the ground, vitu kwa ground, ziko different. And that may be a fact, but the pressure that it creates. Most of these social media followers are people who don't know, they are just ghosts. We don't have to explain to them a thing or what we have done with our lives. And the question is, and rather the truth of the matter is, oftentimes we feel like we're under a lot of pressure from these so-called ghosts, people who possibly do not exist or do exist. But why is there so much pressure? I'll go straight to introducing the guest that we're going to be having this morning to have this discussion. We are joined by Dr. Catherine Siengo Mutisia, who's a psychologist, a psychiatrist. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
We are also joined by Moffat Kago, who's a psychologist. And last but not least, we are joined by Julian Kamau, who is a social media editor. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this morning. And let's start with you, Moffat. The question here being, do you agree that there is undue pressure that comes from social media on society in general before we concentrate on the youth?
Thank you very much, Mike, and very good morning even to our viewers this morning. Yes, indeed, I would say that there's a lot of pressure coming from the social media. But again, I would also wish to say that it all depends on where a child has been raised. You know, if a child has been raised to to become a victim of what we call external locus of control, meaning that whatever attitudes they have, whatever worldview they have, is to a very great extent, based or as a result of what others say or think about them. Then you realize that this is the category of people who will fall victims to this, what we are calling social media pressure.
Okay.
But again, it is, yes, thank you.
All right. Dr. Siengo, do you agree that it depends on the upbringing of the child? Because there seems to be a new culture in a way that people feel and think, and we are driven by the numbers that we see on our social media handles, the likes, the dislikes, if you like. Do you agree that it's up to upbringing?
Somehow, because the exposure to internet and social media, it's provided in the family. But again, that's not entirely true, because we know that especially teenagers, they will listen more to their peers. And even if at home they are not allowed to access internet, then they will use either their friends' phones or their friends' internet to access social media. Sometimes even the clips will be forwarded to them. And again, when we look at social media, it's not entirely negative. There is also some positive bit of it. So what is important is for the young people and even adults to realize that when to stop, when to know that it's affecting your health, and when to use it for positive gains.
All right. And let's hear from Julian Kamau, who's a social media editor. And Julian, maybe give us the facts or separate the facts and fiction of how real some of these figures are. For instance, if you go to Instagram, there are people who have 1 million followers, others have 500,000, and sometimes it just blows your mind to imagine, are there all these people, or is it possible that some of these, like somebody has described them, are merely just ghosts out there? They're just numbers.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Michael. So, yes, there are people who have a very huge following on social media. And just to give a rough figure of how many users in Kenya use social media, we have about half of Kenya, basically 22 million people use the internet, and about 18 of those are on social media platforms. So having a following is a big deal on the social media platforms. But I think, like one of us mentioned here, it's very true that there are bots sometimes that people, rather they use funny ways of getting followers on their pages, but there are also those who have very genuine followers. But the flip side of this is that the more you get approval, the more you want approval on social media platforms. The more you get likes, the more you want more. And people have been known to get a lot of anxiety because of this, of seeking approval rather on the social media platforms.
Okay, and maybe we'll come back to you on maybe how one can tell if these are genuine followers or not, because we seem to get approval based on the numbers that we have. But let me come to you, Dr. Mutisia, on the question of what is it about us that is craving so much approval from the world out there that if I get likes, I feel good about it. If I get follows, I feel good about it. On the negative side, or on the flip side, if I post a picture and it has very few likes, I somehow feel, you know, like that is saying something about me, whereas that may not be true.
Yes, because the right thing is to be able to get self-validation from yourself. And if you're getting any outside validation, then it should be a top-up. But you find that many people do not believe they are good enough, and they expect the society to tell them whether they are good enough or not. And so when you post, for those people, when they post a picture and it doesn't have as many likes as they would have wished, to them they interpret that just because the society doesn't think they are good enough, they're actually not good enough. So the key thing is self-esteem, so that you already can validate yourself and you do not have to wait for external validation. And just like it would happen in normal life outside social media, that if you're doing something and you know you're doing it right, whether people tell you you've done it right or not, you should be able to tell yourself, I've done my best.
Okay.
That's how I look at it.
That's how you look at it. Mr. Kago, what are the potential pitfalls? And now we want to mainly look at the youth, because that's, I think, the target that is mainly targeted by social media. What are the potential pitfalls of falling into that trap of waiting for validation from the world out there?
Thank you very much, Mike. And to a very great extent, I would also wish to build on what Daktari has said. And one of the things that I would call a pitfall or a risk is when we have someone who is coming from a background that I would call somehow empty, in that they are having a lot of emotional emptiness. They are having a lot of a background that judges them and stuff like that. And therefore, when they are coming out to the world, you realize that they are seeking for validation that they missed somewhere else. And I think this also builds on what I had earlier said, that these are the people who are mainly, they seek for what we would call, external locus of control, that they do not have anything, or rather, if there is anything, it's very little, that they are not able to, build their self-worth. They are not able to, they have not found people who are able to validate them, right from their onset, in that they have been judged harshly by their background. And these are the people who grow up feeling that everybody has to, everybody has to validate them. And when that validation is not forthcoming, they feel like they are not good enough. And I think this is one of the major pitfall. And as we have also said earlier, you realize that this is a category of group that will seek to be validated, or they will seek to take what their peers are saying as a gospel truth.
Right.
So if somebody is coming from this background, you realize that they are highly susceptible to this kind of pressure.
All right. And Julian, coming to you, there is that question of real and fake. And maybe just to bring into perspective what we're talking about, we have a current series that's trending on YouTube, The Moriahs, and I'm sure you're familiar with that. And currently, there's even, apparently it's number 1 and 2. And the series is more or less designed on a family that is feuding. It's, as it were, airing their dirty linen out there, whether scripted or real. What the people out there may not know is that if it is scripted, then it's purely for likes. It's purely for those numbers. Right now, with 1.1 million views, that is something that potentially could be monetized. So this could be a business, as it were. But how do we tell when we are going from reality to something that is scripted purely for monetary reasons?
Okay, yes. So how to know that, how to find out if an account is actually a bot or it's a real person. First of all, you have to check when the account was opened. And most times you'll realize that the account was probably opened a few hours or a few days ago, because what people do is that they'll open very many accounts, but for a specific cause. So when the account was opened, can tell you a lot whether this is a genuine account or a fake account. Secondly, it's the abnormal activity. If you find an account that's liking it's sharing over 1,000 times in a day or even more, that's actually marked as abnormal activity on all social media platforms. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. So that's also a disclaimer that you might also want to know. Also the fact that people are not using their real numbers, their real photos, on their pages. They're not using a photo, they're probably just using generic image as their profile photo. That could also be a red flag. There's also engagement. You need to go through to their pages and look at the kind of content they're actually sharing on their platforms. So are they just, is their role there just to share, like, comment, but they never start meaningful conversations? Do they engage with people? Because normal people want to have conversations on social media. So they'll post something, guys will respond, and you're going to, of course, engage them. It's going to be a two-way kind of communication.
All right.
So those are some of the ways, yeah.
Okay. Do you agree that we're getting to a point where there is desperation in terms of trying to get those numbers and likes, even with the content that we're curating now? And this being one example, but we have others where you find they're bordering on pornography and, stuff that is really outrageous, purely just to get those followers and those likes. Are we getting there?
Yes, unfortunately, that's where we're headed. And it's actually a mental problem, just like the psychologist Moffat mentioned. It's more of a mental issue where you want approval from other people. Guys have done really, really crazy things to get likes. We've had people sharing their nudes. We've had people sharing very personal, intimate conversations or even details about their lives. And we've also had situations where, especially teenagers, share photos, they put filters. You don't know what happens behind the screen. For example, you'll find someone has taken, for example, an hour or even more just trying to put on makeup, and they're going nowhere. They're going to put on makeup, they're going to get the right filter, different angles, different poses, just to get that one photo. And when you get that picture perfect photo and you share and you don't get the feedback that you've been looking for, the approval, it damages their self-esteem. And people have actually been known to even delete photos that did not get as much engagement or likes as they had hoped to get. It's actually an obsession, and it's very
an obsession. Real. All right, and Dr. Mutisia, that obsession that we are slowly getting into as a society, how do we ensure and safeguard, particularly the younger ones, our children, that they get enough validation from whatever angle, from themselves, from their parents, such that they're not so thirsty for the validation from out there, such that when it doesn't come through, we've even had cases of suicide, simply because a picture did not trend when we expected it to trend?
Yes, we say that in early childhood, before 12 years of age, that parents need to build their children's self-esteem by praising them or using reward system to shape behavior, as opposed to more of the traditional discipline of either caning or denying privileges or enforcing consequences. And the fact that if a parent or a caregiver spends enough time with the child, then the child grows up knowing that they're actually important to the parent.
Sorry, let me interrupt you there, Dr. Mutisi, and I just want to challenge something you're saying, because there are those who feel and believe that the reward system currently is what has made children feel entitled, such that when they post that picture, they feel that, hey, the world owes me those likes. When they don't come through, I'm going to deal with the world by killing myself. Whereas those of us who grew up them days, really there was no accreditation, there was no reward system. You are left more or less, to grow up on your own and validate yourself, so to speak.
Okay, when I talk about praise and using rewards to shape behavior in childhood, I also mentioned that it needs to be balanced with self-control, where the child is taught persistence, where they are told how to identify their emotions, like when you are sad, when you are anxious, when you are fearful. So when you balance all that, building persistence, building resilience, and at the same time, praising the child and rewarding them, then the child gets a balanced self-esteem. And by the time they reach teenage, they know that they are good. They do not really have to rely on their peer pressure. But you brought in another angle of business, where people are doing crazy posts for business to either drive the audience to their page for the sake of business, either adverts, which is totally different. And I think there should be regulation on that. So how much of nudity, how much of effort should a company be allowed, or a page should be allowed to go to the extent of marketing. We are also seeing the bit where people are doing it for marketing reasons to catch attention, but we are also looking at the young people. They need to understand that self-esteem should come from yourself. You should believe, if you believe you're good enough, you're lovable, and that you can cope with situation, then you shouldn't wait for external validation. That should come up as a top-up. So once they understand that, then they wouldn't really have to rely on social media for feeling good.
For feeling good. All right, let me go to Moffat Cargo. What are some of those things that we need to do? What are we lacking as a society that is making us run to social media to get that from, particularly the younger generation that is now what we call the information age?
Thank you very much, Mike, once again. First of all, I need to say that my school of thought is that we should, to a very great extent, encourage internal motivation or internal validation or internal reward, because I think this is also what seems to be lacking in the general society. And a little bit going back to your earlier question, I think when we are able to encourage this internal motivation, meaning that the motivation of this child does not have to come from external, it is able to make this child be very strong in the way they reason, in the way they look at the world. Now, coming to the larger society, I think this is my personal observation, I think we are lacking a society that is able to, wear the lenses of others and feel or view the world the way others are able to see it. And therefore, you realize that which a person is lacking from their background, when it comes to the general public, you realize that there are many people who are lacking the same. And therefore, it goes without saying that this child or this human being will be in constant search for validation, will be in constant search to feel this emptiness and they do not know where to go. But I would wish to say that socially, we really need to create safe spaces. You know, if it is in churches, if it is in schools, at our places of work, we really need to create these safe spaces so that these people are able to speak out their vulnerability, and there can be someone to hear them, there can be someone who is objective, and most importantly, there is someone who is willing to wear their subjective lenses so that they are able to allow them into their allow them to tour their hearts. And for when we are able to do that, you realize that we are able to help these people from a point of understanding. Many times, and these are cases which we have dealt with, you realize that when you go to someone who doesn't have something to offer, maybe because of that feeling of helplessness, they make your situations even worse. And that is why when children, or when our youth, when our teenagers go to their peers, because their peers do not have something to offer, as a solution to the problem they are going through, they can only make it worse.
Right. Okay, Julian, coming to you, and maybe there is a positive side to it. This is maybe what many people try to capitalize and take advantage of. Not all of them, but there is the monetizing side of social media. Maybe talk us through that, because there are those who probably would demonize it and think that social media is something to avoid, yet the world currently is heading in that direction. Particularly now with COVID-19, we discovered there's so much we can do with social media and technology, including the interview we are having right now. Previously, you'd have been in studio.
Yes, very true. Social media presents a lot of opportunities for individuals and also for brands and businesses. So it's not actually all doom and gloom for social. And how I look at it is that social media is just a tool. It's just a platform. And depending on how you use it, it can be used as an evil, and it can also be used as a good. So it's actually your decision to know how you want to utilize the opportunities presented by the social media platforms. So one, you can use social media to build your individual brand. So you can decide, this is how I want to build my brand. This is what I want to be known for. You can choose a cause. And for example, just a random example, if you're a feminist, for example, you can decide you're going to use your platform to push for that agenda, or even human rights, very many causes that are very influential, or rather that improve the society for the better. So also for organizations, you can decide we're going to use this social media platform to increase our fan base, our audiences, and as a result, get more people liking your pages, and not just liking, because even for businesses, you just don't want likes. You want meaningful engagement from comments to shares, to people just coming to your page to just because they like the content on the pages. And as a result, you're able to monetize this. Remember, you can monetize social media either through partnerships, through other companies that look at you as an individual and see that you have quite a number of followers. This is what influencers do. If they find that as an individual, you're able to influence people in your age group, for example, mothers, or different causes, they can partner with you. Yeah.
And maybe talk us through a brand, what really a brand is, because whether we do it intentionally or with subconsciously, we are actually putting out a brand out there. And like I mentioned, maybe social media is something that was not used before, but for instance, if you went for a job interview, one of the things that potential employer might do is go to your social media handles just to see what brand have you created. And if it mismatches what they're looking for, it could potentially actually even cost you that job which you'd have got.
Yes, that's very, very true, 100% true. For a brand, it's very important to be intentional on what you put out. On your social media pages, because yes, you're building your brand, whether you know it or you don't. And it could, of course, mess up your opportunities in future, or even give you better opportunities. I think we've seen cases of people appointed to very senior boards and having to be withdrawn because of just one comment that you made that was did not go very well with the people, the stakeholders of the different sections. So it's very important. And yes, in interviews, we particularly, most employers are actually asking you for your social media handles to just go through your timeline, see what do you post, what is your worldview, are you emotionally stable? Because you can actually tell whether someone is emotionally stable by just what they post on their pages. And whether they are well informed, and how even how they interact with other people. You can tell a lot about a person just through their social media pages.
Social media handles. All right, and we'll come back to you on how maybe one can, you know, brand position properly, positively, so that you can monetize and make sure that you take advantage of that. But let me come to you, Dr. Mutisia, and what are the potential mental challenges and issues that one is likely to face out of this social media pressure, and maybe take us through some of them and how to identify them?
Yes, right from people looking at social media and comparing it with the life they are living, we know very well that people will post the best. Rarely do people post negative things or what is not going on right in their lives. So for young people, when you look at the pictures which have been put out and you see, compare it with your life and say, my life is not as good as so-and-so's life, then that could lead to depression, it could lead to anxiety. And that's why we need to keep reminding the young people that social media is, whatever people post is not what they are really living. And we've seen many young people getting anxious, getting depressed. I've seen many young people getting bullied, and to the extent of even having to abandon their lines, to close all their accounts because they posted something and they were bullied. So we're seeing a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of cyberbullying, which is affecting young people.
Okay. Kago, maybe some of the other things that you possibly would highlight that are possible mental illnesses that we could face because of the social media pressure.
Thank you very much. I think one of the challenges that these young people are likely to face is unnecessary pressure and even obscuring their ability to look at their future with, wearing the lens, with the confidence, I would say. Because many a times when if what you are looking for, you do not get it from the social media, chances are that these people are going to feel frustrated and, remain anxious and probably confirm one irrational thinking that one has had from the onset. And if they have not been accepted in their social, or rather in their talk of even their background, and here is the social media, and they also feel not accepted, chances are that there is going to be a feeling of being overwhelmed. And this can also, as you rightly put it, Mike, lead to some even suicidal ideations and stuff like that. So I think in as much as there is a lot of positive things that our young people and generally all of us can look up to as far as the social media is concerned, I think it is also very much important for us to be aware of, such issues, things to do with anxiety and continuing to experience, more feelings of emptiness and stuff like that. I think this is also a challenge that someone is likely to face, from our social circles, social media.
All right. Let me come back to you, Dr. Mutisia. And one of the issues that we may be having, and this is not just to the youth, it's all of us generally, particularly those who have access to social media, is addiction. How can one identify that they are addicted to their phone or to their gadgets, and how do we get through that?
Yes, we are seeing a lot of addiction where you'll find people on their sleeping even with their phones, so that even at midnight they could wake up and check what is going on, what we call fear of being left out. And that when you find that it's affecting your work, like instead of working, you're spending most of your time on social media, or it's affecting your relations. You go for a family meeting and you're not engaging the people you are with physically, you're busy on your social media. We're also having teenagers and children complaining that, yes, their parents are at home, but they are never there. They are busy on their phones and their computers. So when you find that it's actually affecting your work, your social life, and if you forgot your phone, for example, or if you're in a situation where you could not access your phone, you start getting agitated, you start being irritable. Those are signs that you're getting addicted to social media. And people who have to keep checking, I posted something, how many likes do I have? That's also an indication. And when you reach there, then you need to detox and reduce your social media use. And because it has actually been shown, it can increase rates of anxieties and depression. And to some extent, with cyberbullying, we've had young people even commit suicide.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, I'll come to you, Kago, on tips on how to ensure that you avoid or how to get out of that space where you're getting addicted to your gadgets and social media. But maybe coming to you, Julian, are there tips that you can help us out with knowing that we are now becoming addicted, and how do we detox, like Daktari calls it? Are there maybe tools or ways of ensuring that we keep off social media, even if just for a healthy time? Julian.
Yes, the ways that you can use to make sure that you're not addicted. One, you can know you're addicted if after you put out, first of all, if you put out a post, you're checking every single minute to see who has liked, who's commented. Every single 3-4 minutes you're checking. That's an addiction. If you are also affected by the comments so much, the comments that come through, or rather if you don't get likes, if it affects you, makes you feel bad, makes you feel low, feel like people don't like you, don't like your content, it means it's giving you a problem. So for me, what I've seen people do in the past is there are tools actually that you can use that do not show you the number of likes that you have. It just tells you people are liking your posts on Instagram, for example. So you install softwares that do not tell you the number of people, because if you have 5, you'll be anxious. Again, if you get 100, you'll actually want more and more and more. So even the social media platforms themselves, I realize the danger, or rather the negative side of these platforms on young people's self-esteem and desire for approval, and they're actually working towards removing the like button. Instagram is actually having that conversation of removing the like button such that you don't have to see the number of people who've liked your post.
Okay.
You can also detox by getting out of the platform, even if it's for a week. A few days, just to go to the real world and re-strategize your mind and everything. So many people have actually done that, and they do realize that it has that effect on them.
Okay, what is your take, Julian, on the social dilemma? There's been a narrative that even the crafters and the makers of these apps that we use are purely intentionally making it addictive, because for them, that generally, bottom line is that it's monetary. What is your take on that?
It's actually true, because it's a business. You need to realize that they didn't put the platforms there just for the sake of having the platforms. They have a strategy, and they actually use the addiction aspect to their advantage, most of them. Yeah, so they know the cycle, how you just join the platform. At first, it doesn't mean much, but within a short period of time, you get addicted. And how they do this is that they monitor your user behavior, the kind of content that you really like, and they'll keep giving you more of it. So it's a strategy, it's very planned, it's not coincidental. They want you to like the platform so much, spend so much time on the platforms, and of course, they get to monetize it. So that's where communities and psychologists, the other part of society needs to now keep them accountable. And that's when we have to ask these hard questions and ask if this platform is doing more harm than good. We need to reduce this. And that's why we are having even laws that are going to start binding these platforms so that they don't take the addiction aspect of these platforms to hook more young people on the social media.
All right, and well, we are running out of time, so I'll do a round of closing comments. Let me start with you, Dr. Mutisia. Your closing remarks and maybe advice to all of us in regards to addictions, depression, and maybe there is a line, there's a common line between, say, drug addiction and even addiction to social media. We might want to sanitize and feel that addiction to social media is probably a better addiction than drugs, but maybe from a psychologist or psychiatrist point of view, there is no difference. Your closing remarks.
My closing remarks is that we need to use social media with a name, like we've rightfully discussed about branding, and maybe for business and maybe for building your brand. But on the other hand, we shouldn't use it and expect to be getting validation from it. We need to build our own self-esteem outside other people's approval. And we need to watch out that you don't get addicted to your phone. When it's time to sleep, put off your phone. When it's a social meeting, put off your phone. When it is you're supposed to relax, take time, like once in a week, and decide today it's no phone day, and detox, and watch out. When you go on social media and you start feeling sad or anxious, ask yourself, why did I start feeling like that? Is it a post I saw, and why would that post be affecting me? And then look out for the things you tell yourself, which other people might not know.
All right, yes. Mr. Kago, your closing remarks.
My closing remarks I would wish to say that considering that social media, or when we begin to communicate via social media, we are communicating with people that we cannot see. And if somebody realizes that whatever they are not able to verbalize physically with other people, they are able to sit down and write it down. It goes without saying that there is some kind of vacuum that this person needs to deal with. And I would wish to say that psychology says that a behavior that is learned can also be unlearned. And I would wish to say that it is important for us to enhance our physical interpersonal relationships so that we can also be good managers of social media.
All right, Julian Kamau, your closing remarks.
For me, I just want to let people know that wanting likes is not the problem, but being obsessed about the likes is where the issue is. Secondly, you need to know that the people who like your post don't necessarily care about you, or even won't remember. Sometimes it's just a thoughtless behavior. It's just like it's the normal thing expected to do, to like your post. So having more likes does not necessarily mean that these people like you or like your content, or that they are thinking about you, because sometimes those people do it just very thoughtlessly. Even when you think about your own social media consumption, by the time you've liked that post, you've moved on to the next interesting post. And if I asked you an hour later, do you remember the likes you had on social, you liked someone's post and what they were saying, you most probably would not remember. So we should not give the likes on social media as a lot of value, like to a point of affecting our real lives. And let's seek approval in real life as opposed to the social media platforms. And also lastly, be very intentional with your social media content and how you use those platforms. Yes.
All right, thank you very much. That's Julian Kamau's social media editor. We also had Dr. Catherine Sengo Mutisia, who's a psychiatrist, and Moffat Kago, who's a psychologist. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this morning to have that discussion on social media. And while we are at that, let me see how many likes I have on this particular subject. And, well, not very encouraging, but there you go. Anyway, I'm just joking. But yeah, I'll be checking that a little bit later on. But social media definitely is a subject that we cannot avoid because that's the way the world is going. But it has positives and negatives, as you've heard. But moving away from that, let's now take a look at stories making headlines on the international scene. A UN report due to be published this week details a strong financial position of